Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new video, and welcome to day 47 of our F125 wet hot lap and track guides. Yes, we return this weekend here to the Circuit of the Americas, of course. If you missed out on the video that went live a couple of days ago from Singapore, I would highly recommend going back and checking it out. Of course, we're getting towards the end of the Formula 1 season now. We've got, I think, 5 setups after this. I don't know for sure if I'm going to do the reverse wet tracks as well, because it seems like not many people are interested in setups for those circuits anyway inside this game. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll just jump straight in with the Formula 2 setups instead. But yeah, of course, if you're new around here and you don't know what this series is all about, I basically go through, I provide you with a race-ready wet setup inside F125. I talk you around the circuit, where your braking markers should be, what gears you want to be using through the corners, and any other important information. And then last but not least, I leave you with a hot lap. Of course, as always, timestamps will be linked down in the description below if you just want to head to a certain part of this video. At the time of recording, we are very, very close to 14,000 subscribers, so please, if you're new, consider hitting that sub button as well. It would massively, massively help us out. I'd love to maybe get another one of these one day as well. But yeah, Circuit of the Americas, I remember doing the dry setup around here. It's such a difficult lap to try and get hooked up in F125. It is such high commitment, high speed, high bravery in a lot of places. In the wet though, not so bad. Just kind of the way a lot of this circuit is near enough flat out in, obviously, the dry, means that a lot of this circuit now, of course, you're having to blend through the throttle and use the gears a bit more strategically, and everything like that. So yeah, I actually find this circuit more enjoyable to hot lap in the wet than in the dry conditions. But yeah, without further ado then, let's head out onto the track, and I'll talk you guys around a lap here of Texas. Well, making our way then in towards the final couple of corners here, ready to start a lap of the Circuit of the Americas. Make sure you get the car nicely over this curbing on the outside, and then get the car down into second gear as we rotate in through that final corner nice and early on the throttle. Of course, as soon as you're up to fourth gear, that is when you want to try and get on the loud pedal. You can use the track width on the run up towards turn 1. I like to get the car nicely over this outside curb, but just be very, very careful. You will struggle with locking up. You want to brake at about 70 meters out. The reference point I'm using is actually that cameraman up on his little stand in towards that first corner. So as soon as that little stand goes out of shot, that's when you want to be getting on the anchors. From 7th gear, you're going to try and bring the car all the way down to 2nd on the way into turn 1, and then just as you get up over the top of the hill, short shift up through 3rd. Just then as you go over the top of the lip, you want to go up to 4th, and that is when you can get full throttle down on the exit of the corner. 5th and 6th gear then, as we make our way through turn 2, completely flat out through there. You will be trying to hang on to the car though, and then in towards the S as we go. Try to really attack the first one as best as you can. Down 1 gear through the second one, and then leave it in 5th gear through the next couple as well. Through here, it is all about just trying to attack those curbs, but keeping the front end balanced, and obviously keeping it neat and tidy. And then just as you go past the green Astro on the outside there, down to 4th gear, again try to keep it tidy. Dab the brake to get a bit of weight over the front end, and again, you're going to be dabbing the brake slightly. Into 3rd gear, attack the curb through the first part, but I like to avoid that orange sausage curb on the exit. You'll notice on our hot lap, I got a huge moment of oversteer up over the top of the hill, but it wasn't the end of the world. We were able to keep going then. Up into 6th gear as we make our way down the hill. Want to brake about 80 meters out from this next corner. Again, you're going to be all the way down in 2nd gear. Try to attack the apex curb as best as you can. Avoid the exit curb though. Short shift up through 3rd, and then when you get into 4th, that again is when you can get that throttle to the floor. Carry the speed as we make our way up the back straight. Then you're going to be all the way up in 8th gear as we prepare ourselves for sector 3 of the lap. Of course, you want to keep the car over on the right-hand side, braking about 125 meters out. Obviously, this downhill braking zone, very, very easy to understeer out wide. 2nd gear, attack the first curb. You can actually take a lot of curb through there, and then short shift up through 3rd and 4th on the exit. I like to go down to 3rd gear and really attack this next apex. Try to get the inside wheels on that orange sausage curb. Leave it in 3rd gear on the exit, and then try to get the power down. You want to just get up to full throttle before you're again back on the anchors. Want to be using that curbing on the outside. 2nd gear once again. as we make our way in towards these final few corners, and the traction out of there is really, really difficult. Back up through 3rd, 4th, and even 5th gear as we make our way into the Turkey S section towards the end of the lap. You're going to be 5th gear through here, just balancing the throttle at about 75%, and then when the circuit finally opens up, that is when you can get full throttle. Leave it in 5th gear as we make our way in towards this penultimate corner of the lap. Be careful not to attack too much curb, otherwise it will just throw the front end out. And then in towards this final corner, you want to be braking just before this white line. The final turn here, there's no real reference point around the lap, which is a little bit awkward, so you've just got to try and find somewhere that works for you. I like to kind of brake, anticipate where that white line is. It's not a foolproof plan, but it's not too bad either, as there we go then. That is going to be a lap of the Circuit of the Americas. It is one of those circuits, despite the fact, obviously, it's very modern. It feels kind of a bit more old school, of you've kind of just got to find a bit of a flow around here. You'll find that a lot of lines, a lot of braking points, you know, gear usage, things like that work very, very well. But there will be a few bits and pieces where you might want to take a slightly different line, say through the S's and things like that. It is just one of those tracks where kind of finding what works for you is really, really important, because there are quite a few lines that work around here. Without further ado though, let's head back to the pit lane and I'll talk you guys through the setup. Well, having a look then at our setup figures here for the Circuit of the Americas then, first of all, very, very high downforce around here. 46-42 on the wing. You want to make sure you've got that bite through the first sector. I would say if you're doing like a league race or something like that, you could lower this to about 38-41. But of course, yeah, the straights here aren't that long in the grand scheme of things, and they've both got huge DRS zones. So, you know, it's very, very easy for people to pick up track limits warnings. So having a little bit more downforce, having a little bit more stability will probably make a big, big difference. 100% on the on-throttle diff, 25% on the off-throttle. Again, that seems to be where the meta is shifting on F125. It just gives you a bit more traction in the wet conditions without compromising you too much speed. Minus 3.4, minus 1.9, 0.02 and 0.12 for your camber and toe angles. Again, that's fairly standard for what we run inside this game. It just gives you a little bit extra tire saving ability as well. But yeah, very, very little changes from what we saw in the dry conditions. 35.6 for your front and rear suspension. A little bit more aggressive than we see around a lot of venues. But yeah, Texas isn't a particularly bumpy track either inside this game. 8.14 for your anti-roll bars. Fairly normal stuff. And then 24.51 for the ride height. Again, you are trying to attack a few of the curbs around here. You always run the ride height a little bit higher in the wet, but you could make this a little bit lower if you're not struggling too much with instability as well there. 55.97 for your brake bias and pressure. Fairly standard stuff inside this game. And then 28.4 front PSIs, 22 on the rears as well. 10 lefts, 10 right-handers around this circuit, so you actually get through all 4 tyres pretty evenly. This was always a track on previous games where tyre wear was never a concern, but actually it's really, really tight inside this game. Even in the dry, you know, a 2-stop strategy isn't actually that bad. So, yeah, 28.4 though, you should be able to 1-stop on the intermediate or the full wet as well there. Thank you all so much for watching as always. If this video has helped you out, like I mentioned in the intro, make sure you leave a like, get yourselves subscribed as well. I'm going to leave you guys with a hot lap, and we'll be back very soon ready in Mexico City.
Excellent lap. We're all very, very pleased with that one. Nice work. Come on, I'll see you back in the pits.